So Michael Brito is here with us talking about buyer personas. Michael, tell us who you are, what you do with buyer personas, your company. Give us all those good details.
Sure. My name is Michael Brito. My colleagues actually call me just by my last name, Brito. So if you know me, call me Brito. If you don't, Michael's fine. Just never call me Mike. I will not answer. I hate that name. I don't know why.
Good to know.
So I work for Zeno Group. We are an integrated communications agency, and I lead our analytics organization. So it's a global team, and we do everything from upfront research and analytics, including audience analytics, to like real-time optimization of campaigns and then measurement. So looking at quantifying either a paid program or in many cases also like an earned program, because the question is, I'm investing in PR, what's the ROI, what's the impact? Yeah. So we do kind of that full cycle analysis of a program. So data that informs a program, the program launch, and then measuring of that program.
Very cool.
And yeah, so I've been there three and a half years. It's a great company, great leadership, and our analytics practice has grown, I want to say like 900%.
Wow.
Just in terms of the team members and kind of the work that we're doing. And we're constantly innovating and trying to think of like new ways to, pull data, scrape data, mine data, and also present it in a way that our clients can be, that is actionable,
Yes, so, actionable.
Yeah, very much actionable. So
that's been the key word. And like that's the common thread that's gone through almost every conversation we've had is that those of us who are really passionate about like creating these personas or gathering this information, doing digital analysis is to make the information actionable. So tell me about that. Like, how do you do that? What's your approach to the digital analysis and making sure it's actionable?
Well, audience did not ask me to say this, but they're a great partner in that process. Just the ability to, just the way that they've built their platform helps us in building these audience personas. Now, I'm a firm believer though that if you look at the kind of the spectrum of an analysis, right, in terms of like time spent as an analyst or as a team spent on a project. Mm-hmm. My opinion is that 30% of that time is in the platform. It's building the audience, it's letting the algorithms do what they do. And then 70% is a human layer analysis. Mm-hmm. So it's mining the data, it's cross-referencing the data, it's building pivot tables in Excel to do all these beautiful things. And so when I'm thinking about a persona, it's like, okay, I have a platform like Audience, and they give me really good affinity data around follower relationships and things like that. I can build very robust audiences around either topic areas or job titles or things like that. But then there's another element to, there's a large process of cleansing the data, but then also let me give you an example.
Yeah, please.
We did an analysis on the C-suite, and we ran the analysis through Audience, and we built the analysis, the audience in Audience, and then we ran the analysis. Mm-hmm. And we found that, they're, from a media consumption standpoint, they follow the New York Times, they follow Wall Street Journal, they follow Bloomberg and Reuters. That was great, but that was kind of expected.
Right.
We would all think that the CEO and CIO and COO are subscribed and reading that. What was interesting, which then when we looked and layered on conversational data, there were some, not discrepancies, just interesting insights. Like, for example, there was a high percentage of C-suite who follow Bloomberg, yet they don't share anything about Bloomberg articles or Bloomberg, the publication on their social channels. None. And vice versa is true. They are, a high percentage of them don't follow, I think it was either GigaOM or one of the smaller techie publications. Maybe it was Ars Technica. So there's not a high percentage of them who follow Ars Technica, but the conversation around Ars Technica amongst the C-suite was tremendous. Wow. I know. So it's just interesting to leverage a platform, and that is insightful because now we can see where the C-suite consumes media. So I'm thinking like a marketer now. Yeah. Maybe we buy media. Maybe we do some display advertising on Forbes, Fortune, whatever, or maybe we start pitching reporters if I'm in PR of that publication. So that's where the affinity data comes in. Then the conversational data is, okay, that's where you really find and uncover hidden narratives. So now
Mm-hmm.
it's not just the who, it's the what. Maybe we create content on our own channels around this, and this. We target these channels, we pitch these journalists, and that's exactly what I mean by, data being actionable.
Actionable. That's so good because so you are using, it's not just about, well, I guess this is a good way to say it. You couldn't just sign up to these kinds of platforms. We use Audience. I do as well. Audience is hosting this entire thing for us, but there are others. You couldn't just sign up and be like, okay, great. Now I'm going to pull it and it's all going to be amazing. And there's no work involved. I guess it really does require someone to go in and find the deeper insights. Would you say that's true?
I mean, 100%. Like you can export the dashboards, right, from Audience, and I've done it before just to, if it's like an internal team member needs like a quick, snapshot kind of, of an audience. But I don't, and no offense to any of the platforms, like I don't just,
Sure.
even like Brandwatch and others, like they all have these exportable, reports in PDF and PowerPoint. I would never ever just export one and send it to a client, because it's just there's so many. It's not smart to do
Mm-hmm.
that, and it does require kind of, a level of analysis. And one thing that I also mentioned is, or I should mention is, and I'm thinking about this C-suite analysis that we did, is leveraging like secondary research. So,
Mm-hmm.
like Deloitte or PwC or Accenture, they put out these, reports around the
Yeah.
C-suite all the time. And a lot of times I use that to either validate or invalidate the data, or in some cases it's included in the analysis. Like, for example, the digital transformation is top of mind for the C-suite in the pandemic, and the acceleration of software adoption, blah, 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 blah. And that is part of the write-up, leveraging, a third-party secondary research, but then a deeper analysis of their conversation and affinities layered on top of that.
That is so interesting. So can you tell me more about that? Because I feel like that is a key step that's kind of like a hidden nugget that maybe someone out there who's in-house or new at this wouldn't even consider. So can you walk me through that process a little bit?
Yeah. So, well, I'll use this C-suite one as an example, only because we literally just finished it and I was the lead on that. We're presenting it tomorrow.
Yes.
But yeah, so if I'm a brand, if for those of you watching or anybody watching who works for a brand, and you want to provide actionable, insights to either your executive team, or if you're an agency at your client, we just started using third-party research to start the process of understanding their hypothesis. Because if PwC or Gartner or somebody does an analysis, I'm pretty comfortable with their methodology, right?
Mm-hmm.
How they, build their questionnaires and their surveys and their respondents and the panel. Like, I'm pretty confident that those, and there's a bunch of, very reputable, Deloitte, Accenture.
Yeah.
So that is kind of the kickoff into the analysis piece for us. Because if Deloitte, releases a survey that says, the top 5 things that keep CEOs up at night are digital transformation, cybersecurity, AI, all these things, then that is a trigger for us to say, okay, well, let's go into, our platform, let's do some analysis, let's filter for some keywords, and let's provide context. So yeah, digital transformation, they use the hashtag. Okay, they've mentioned it, but what about digital transformation? Because it can mean anything to anybody. So the context of the conversation, and also the combination of affinity data, and also doing a lot of influencer work as well with Audience, is I found to be even more effective than other influencer platforms. I can get to that if you'd like, but we're able to then look at, okay, within the context of digital transformation, there is 65% of the conversation is around scale. 5% of the conversation is about integration. 3% of the conversation is about securing, remote workers, right? Yeah. Because that has accelerated this idea of software adoption. So, so that, and by the way, I'm simplifying it, but this was a 6-week project. It was a 6-week project, and probably about 85 to 90 hours collectively of work to draw these conclusions. And we can start providing topically based insights based on looking at a third party, secondary research study from Deloitte or Accenture to start us down the road of understanding what could be top of mind for an audience, like the C-suite, or in many cases, the millennial in, Bend, Oregon, who wears Birkenstocks and prefers craft beer, whatever the audience is.
Yeah.
That, using something else to help us start that process.
I love that. That is so good, because you're beginning research with an end in mind. Like, we need to create something that's actionable. We're not just like out here willy-nilly trying to, lay down a buyer persona. Do you even call your projects reports buyer personas?
Usually it's, when I think of a persona, I think of like Google it, right? You see like HubSpot has templates galore, right? There's templates everywhere. And that one pager is what me personally, I would consider a persona. Yeah. We do that. Like we a lot of times we'll have one slide that's a snapshot of, top channels, top media preferences, demographics, other things. That is kind of like the intro, because then we deep dive into all these other areas. So when we present like a deck or we sell it, it's not like, I don't sell it as a buyer persona analysis. I sell it as an audience analysis, where the buyer persona is part of that. And it's usually the lead into everything else, because it's that snapshot look that, is shareable with colleagues and things like that.
Yeah.
But the deeper analysis are like what I would consider like the slides afterward.
Very nice. So what are some things that you include in those slides? If you have like your overview, what else is something that you always include?
So we have the overview slide. A lot of times we will look at, and, social audio is kind of a big thing and has been for the last, I would say since January or so. So that was one insight for us, which is the C-suite doesn't just talk about this new phenomenon about social audio. They're very much using it, right? And there's some, there's a few CEOs out of Canada who, and I can't remember what company it is, but they had reported their earnings in a clubhouse room.
Wow.
I know. And now they had already briefed the media. They briefed the media. They went right into a clubhouse room afterward and was talking to anybody and everybody who wanted to listen. So, an insight like, the C-suite is adopting social audio, and the write-up, maybe some, verbatim screenshots of the conversation around social audio. It could be a screenshot of the actual room that they're talking about. And so that's an area that we like to provide those insights. It's not just conversation, right? Because we can do a conversation analysis on any audience to understand those topics. But outside of that, it's also like we'll look at media. Oh, here's a great one. What we've done is we've looked at and we've plotted all these topics. So let's just say digital transformation, security, and AI. We plot these topics and on imagine like a bubble graph.
Sure.
And we then kind of show the percent of audience that follows certain publications, because we'll plot the publications, and then we'll plot either number of mentions or impressions or like engagement numbers.
Oh, wow.
So so we can start to say, well, the C-suite talk a lot about digital transformation, and they're sharing a lot of content from Fortune. And when they do, they're driving a lot of engagement with their followers, or they're reaching this many people. So because a lot of our clients are in PR, so we purposely try to find insights that would be relevant to them. As PR practitioners, right? I've never worked in PR, but I know what you pitch media. You build relationships with journalists. So they use that to then prioritize which media publications they would for releasing an announcement or some type of exclusive type of embargo, whatever.
Yeah.
So that is another thing. And then influencers is another thing. So, and that's where I think that a platform like Audience provides a lot of value, because when I look at influencers, there's a lot of different measurements, right? There's how large is their network, which could be gained. We all know that you can buy followers, and sadly, a lot of even B2B tech influencers do.
Yeah. So
there's the reach, there's the relevance piece of it. How often are they talking about a topic. There's the resonance piece, which is when they do talk about it, are their followers engaging with it? The reference piece is where what I'm alluding to here in audience, because there's a couple ways to think about this. Is if I have an influencer who is influential in 5G, as an example, and I build this audience of C-suite, and none of the C-suite follows this influencer in 5G, well, that may not be an influencer that I want to engage with, right? Because he or she's not reaching my audience. Whereas if I were to look at and see from an affinity standpoint, what percent of unique C-suite, or what unique affinity in terms of like people, influencers, does the C-suite have? Because we know that 15, 20, 30% of our audience follows these top influencers, and they may not be influential topically on 5G. So that it takes a little bit of like deeper, you can't just, again, export the data and say, we're working with these guys. But that's another way to at least identify those influencers, because they're never the ones that you would think.
Yeah.
They're not the ones that are on these lists every that are published every month. These are people who don't even know they're influencers. They're just influential on topics.
Love that. They're not even necessarily influencers. They're just influential on topics. And that's an important part. Like I include some of that in my buyer persona on a slide that I call relationships. Like I want to know who are the people that are influencing the people that are making decisions, the people that are making buying decisions. I think that's so incredible. Wow. That's a really unique perspective to buyer personas. And when people say, like, I know you're not calling the entire thing a buyer persona, but it's kind of a part and feeds into the whole buyer persona process. And when people, have the idea that buyer personas are a waste of time or pointless or, just this random kind of information. Do you ever have any kind of objections that you have to overcome? Have you heard any of that by potential clients or just people out in the wild?
I've actually read a report a couple of years ago, and it was either Gartner or eMarketer, or maybe even like the data from like Content Marketing Institute that talked about personas and how a high percentage of marketers don't use them or don't update them ever. So, that's a problem. And I think buyer personas are extremely relevant to marketing teams. And I think, but I do think it has kind of a bad, within an organization, I think it has there's a legacy kind of point of view around personas where, and I'm just giving you my limited point of view, right, on the clients that I've worked with.
Yeah.
Where, when I've seen persona slides where it says, meet Emily. She is a single mom who lives in the suburbs of Chicago, shops at Whole Foods, drives Sportage, and is interested in this, and this, and she uses Instagram on the weekends only, right? And it's like, I'm sure that someone in a conference room, they were on a whiteboard and they're like, who is our target audience? Yeah, and then they put it on a slide, and I think that there's a negative connotation to marketers today, because marketers, I think, are a lot more data driven today than they were before, and so I think there's a perspective on when somebody talks about an audience persona or buyer persona. It's just that it's somebody in a conference room putting slides together based on intuition and not real data. So I've had to overcome that a few times. And introducing the concept for the first time is, clients are open to it. That has come up, that pushback has come up in the past, but then also consolidating personas internally. I had a client once who sales had a group of like 5 personas. Marketing had a group of 5 personas. PR had a group of 5, and they were all different. And
product probably had 3 or 4 personas. And
they did. And so we do a lot of consolidated persona audience analysis. So that there's one persona group that is applicable to sales, product, marketing, PR, etc.
Absolutely. I agree with so much of that. I was trying not to laugh because I call that the check the box marketing practice, where the CMO goes into his little conference room and is told from the CEO to get that buyer persona done. And I've seen it. So I'm not like just talking out of like some make believe. I've been on teams where this is what happens. And, over the weekend, we just make the assumptions and get it done. I've seen people who do 6 to 10 personas in a day. And I don't understand how that's even I mean, the kind of personas we create, it's hard to do that. Speaking
Right.
of, so you kind of have your ear to the ground. I know you are a tools guy. You are the one who like knows all the great digital analysis tools. Like you're really into that. And so tell me, knowing what you know and kind of being in the industry for as long as you have, what do you see marketers doing really wrong when it comes to their buyer personas?
Well, I don't think they are using any type of tools. I think they might be using like research, right? So I've seen instances where, there'll be a stat, 45% of millennials use TikTok, or and 89% of Gen Z uses TikTok, right? And that's kind of like, duh, like we know that.
Uh-huh.
So I think that, and there's some other more granular insights that I think you can pull from like there's a site called Statista or Stat. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but you've probably seen graphs and charts of basic demographics. That's all survey-based data. And then there's like Global Web Index is one that is very similar to that. And that has been very helpful. That is actually, I think, a tool that I need to use more of when building personas because, I mean, it's not free. So it's kind of expensive, but, they're just not using data. Or if they are, they're using old data, or they're using data that is, it's a start, but they're missing so many different layers. So that's what I would say. But I do think that marketers are getting smarter because CMOs are demanding ROI across all disciplines. And in order to quantify an investment in marketing, you have to show that your programs have to work, they have to perform. And the only way to achieve high performance, in my opinion, which I think you would agree, is understanding really who your audience is and building a program around that audience.
Yes, absolutely. That's what I say. Like understanding who your audience is who they are, how they behave, and why they behave the way they do. And that requires so much more than just, kind of doing a quick Google search or going off of your gut and your assumptions, which I think a lot of people want to do as well. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, I thank you so much, Michael, for being on with us today. If you could give one last like key nugget of insight to somebody who's brand new trying to figure out this world, what would you share with them?
Oh my gosh, I wasn't prepared for this.
Sorry.
I would, that's okay. I guess it kind of depends upon where you sit. Like, are you in a large company? Are you a consultant? I mean, because I would suggest doing different things. I would just spend some time if you're wanting to understand an audience. There are tools, there are white papers, there's stuff that you've produced that I've seen that's extremely that is great for somebody to understand. This is why it's important. And if it's a situation where you need to like sell in to your C-suite, use those case studies, use those white papers, use that third-party validation to then get budget to invest in a tool or a consultant to help you build these audience personas. Because even though there's an upfront expense in doing that, the results are gonna pay off, right? There will be an ROI because you will have actionable data to inform kind of what you do from a marketing and comm standpoint across the board. So I would just say that do your own desk research, right? Googling is always is great start. There's a lot of really good information out there, and just start there. Start to build your knowledge, and if you need to make the case, or if you need to invest in a tool, Gartner and G2 has great, they plot the different attributes of different platforms like audience and others. Look at that and see what your options are. Do some price comparisons, things like that. So, in a nutshell, just do your research before you like jump into anything that is long term.
Love that. That's very good insight, because we know I feel like the tides are changing for these. Like people are wanting to get more data, wanting to get more tools, wanting to understand their users better, their customers better, and enabling those new guys or the marketers that are sitting at their desk, knowing there's a better way, giving them that path to kind of make your case and lead for some more money is always a really smart move. So I appreciate that. Michael, I appreciate. Where can people find you? If they want to look you up, where can they find you?
I mean, I'm Britopian. That's how people don't know how to pronounce it. It's Britopian, which is my handle. Yeah. BRITOPIAN on like everywhere. So Or, LinkedIn is, I'm always trying to build my network and, find great connections. So LinkedIn and Twitter are like my go-to. To be honest, Twitter is one of those that, it doesn't get a lot of love in the media, but with Twitter Spaces and all these other innovations, I think it's coming back hard. So Twitter and LinkedIn are probably the best places to get a hold of me.
Okay, sounds great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.